Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. Happy New Moon, everybody. Happy Uposatha. This, according to the ancient Indian calendar, is actually the last fortnight of the hot season. So many of you are probably experiencing that hot season wherever you are. I know here in Canada right now, every time I see somebody, they're dripping with sweat. And like, oh, Bante, Bante, it's so hot. And I think it's funny because it's all relative, isn't it? It's quite a bit cooler here in Canada than it is down in Texas. But what you get used to, that's what you consider to be hot or cold or summer or winter or this or that. These are the conventions we live within. Nevertheless, we're going to be moving on to the Vasa season, the monsoon season coming up at the end of the month. And so this is actually quite coming to be quite an important time. The monastic sangha will settle down for 3 months, and hopefully that means we can be a bit more consistent in these posada's and get them on the calendar on a more regular basis. But for the meantime, let us look at what we would like to talk about this evening. And I was actually gifted on the occasion of being traveling the other day, and everybody who showed up at the Wednesday tea time got together and drew up some ideas for topics that could be covered in talks and day-longs. And one of them very helpfully actually listed a sutta as reference. And I thought maybe we could look at this concept this evening and start by reading that sutta. Because I mean, if you're going to drop it in my lap, why not, right? We'll use that. Um, so I will bring it up and we can read it together. It's really quite short. And this sutta is called It's Not Yours. Monks, give up what's not yours. Giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. And what is it that isn't yours? The I isn't yours. Give it up. Giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. Visible sights, eye consciousness, eye contact, the pleasant, painful, or neutral feeling that arises dependent on eye contact. All of these aren't yours. Give them up. Giving them up will be for your welfare and happiness. The ear, the nose, the tongue, and body, also the mind, isn't yours. Give it up. Giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. Mental thoughts, mind consciousness, mind contact, the pleasant, painful, or neutral feeling that arises dependent on mind contact. These aren't yours. Give them up. Giving them up will be for your welfare and happiness. Suppose a person was to carry off all the grass, sticks, branches, and leaves in this Sucheta's grove, or burn them, or do whatever they wanted with them. Would you see that and think, this person is carrying us off, they're burning us. What is it they want to do with us? And to this the monk said, no, venerable sir. Why is that? Because these things, these sticks, branches, and grass, and leaves, these are neither ourself nor belonging to ourself. In the same way, monks, the I isn't yours. Give it up. Giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. So on and so on. Even the pleasant, painful, or neutral feeling that arises dependent on contact isn't yours. Give it up. Giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. So, as you probably recognize, the Buddha there is giving a talk instruction on not self, even though he didn't explicitly say, this is not yourself, this is not yourself, this is not yourself. He's approaching it from pretty much the same angle. He's saying, this is not yours. And when we say something is myself, there is one case where we think the thing is actually us. And for many people, this is an unchallenged notion that this body is who they are. And when you do something to this body, if somebody were to yank off your ear, you would say they yanked off a piece of me. And you would look at that ear and you'd be horrified, right? You would say, I am diminished. I am in two places at once. It would be a sort of conundrum that you would have to work through. But you would have no choice because you'd be staring at the piece of you that's no longer attached to you. And because it is now separate from you, you'd have to redefine what you think to be yourself. But this is a rather extreme example that thankfully most of us don't have to deal with on a daily basis. So we're not confronted with this notion of not us, not belonging to us, as frequently. Because when we are confronted with it, we tend to suffer. It tends to be our natural instinctive response to experience a sort of uh, anxiety, fear, uncertainty about what does this mean, because it challenges notions we probably don't even realize we have, notions of our existence, notions of our control, our responsibility, notions of the conditions we need for our survival. Yeah. And when any of these are challenged, we tend to suffer. Now, the Buddha presents not self as uh, now, he doesn't say as much, like he doesn't lay out to the monks or the lay people, do things in a particular order. Like this not self, it's complicated, set it to the side. Let's get some other things out of the way. We'll talk about dana, we'll talk about sila, we'll talk about, we'll have you meditate on the breath, and then later on we'll talk about not self. The Buddha was not one to teach with closed hands, right? He would teach quite openly. And in this particular talk, he doesn't give a gradual training. He doesn't say like, okay, look, this is complicated. It might freak you out a little bit, but none of this stuff is yours. Your eye isn't yours. Your nose isn't yours. Your body isn't yours. Instead, he just teaches with open hands, trusting that when the mind is ready for these ideas to land, for them to settle and take root, you will have been exposed to them, and they will do just that. They will start to bear fruit. And so in a lot of ways, the Buddha is dealing with two of the main conditions that hold this idea of self in place. He said that beings in the samsara are obstructed by ignorance and fettered by craving. And it's both of these conditions which cause us to instinctively develop this notion of a self and instinctively apply this notion of a self and things belonging to that self, to all of the little things in our world and to our consciousness, to our sense bases, to our thoughts and feelings. We do it instinctively, right? Because of ignorance, we haven't been exposed to the idea that maybe they aren't ourself. And even if we have been exposed to the idea, maybe we didn't trust the source, or maybe we didn't give it sufficient thought. And there is craving, there is desire. Simply put, we have things that we like. We have things that we're trying to get. We have things that we're trying to accomplish. We have things that we want to keep. We have things that we want to protect from change and instability. And because of that want, we're habitually looking to the things we want and away from the things which don't service that want, namely the fact that a lot of these things that we want are actually out of our control. And we don't have the ability to safeguard them from change or to protect them or really to own them in any permanent capacity. Right? So this is something we notice intrinsic to the idea of not self. We see that even though many people, when they hear the idea, they're like, okay, yeah, sure, this isn't me. I can accept that intellectually. And yet, what does it take for somebody to deeply understand this fact? And I would say this is where you see that the Buddha often does teach things in a particular order to ease the mind into a place where it can begin to deeply understand this fact, where it can actually accept this fact. Because until you let go of something, until you no longer have the notion that this thing is me, it's mine, it is myself, then you can't really say that you understand the not self nature of it, can you? I mean, you can say that you'd like to, you can say that you're working on it, but if you're still attached to the thing, then it will still cause you suffering. Yeah, it will still consistently cause you suffering. This order that the Buddha gives usually starts with impermanence. And there's a very good reason for that, because the Buddha can say that all things are impermanent, all things are transient, all things are of the nature to change. And even if we think something is ourself, even if we desire something and are quite attached to it, still we might be able to accept that that thing is changing because the reality is just smacking us in the face, right? There's not much we can do about it. The Buddha can say your body is impermanent. And it doesn't take much to grasp the nature of that. We have seen this. Everybody here is, more than 1 day old. So you have seen your body change. You have seen it move through cycles. It has changed dramatically over the course of your life. And you don't know the future. You don't know how much longer you have, but you can surmise based on every single other human being you have met and every other creature that you have encountered in your life, that your body will continue to change. You can even predict some of the changes that are in store for you. And you can know that at some point, this body is going to die. Again, you can't know the future, but you can intuit that from the fact that every other creature that has ever lived has died. Yeah. So either you're that one exception to the rule, or you're probably going to experience the same fate. And so this idea of impermanence is one of the easiest layers for the mind to grasp. It doesn't actually have to let go of things to start to notice this nature of transience in an object. And this is something we can start applying to things. We can say, oh yeah, this is the third of these wireless mice that I've had for this computer. Yeah, because even though it has no moving parts, they still break somehow. They still experience old age and death. Yeah. Even something such as this. And so I can look at it and I can know that it's working right now, but at some point it will no longer be working. I will put it in the trash and I will get a new one. And the new one I get will probably look just like it. But it will not be the same one. This is change. And I could say for this microphone and this very computer, I could say this room I'm in, I will probably not be in this room in 2 weeks. Yeah. That's actually the plan, right? And so we can look out into our environment and we can see this notion of change. And we can even start to apply it to things that are much closer to us, our body, our senses. We can know based on beings that we have encountered that our eyesight might eventually fail us. Our hearing might eventually fail us. I mean, we don't even have to wait until old age. You get sick and your sense of smell and taste will fail you temporarily, but we can start to understand that this is not a permanent condition. This is not a reliable condition. It actually relies on conditions to exist. Yeah. And we can do this practice of understanding impermanence gradually, one object at a time, until it really starts to take root. And what we find is when it takes root, it's not that the notion of self, of I, me, mine, is permanently shattered by understanding that all things have this nature of impermanence, but there is some layer of desire, some layer of attachment, some layer of infatuation, which crumbles and falls away. Yeah, we find that when we see that something is impermanent, when we see that something is transient, to some degree, we don't invest all of our hopes and desires and aspirations into that thing any longer, right? Usually we tend to rely on things that we think are stable and reliable and permanent and not subject to change. But when we know that something is going to change, we tend to not imprint on it so much. We tend to accept that, okay, this thing, I like it right now, but I know that at some point I'm not going to like it. So I'm not going to get too attached. And this is what we find is that all things, once we understand they're impermanent, we no longer attach to them in the same way. We like them, we enjoy them, we prefer them, but we don't rely on them. We don't think they will always be there for us. Instead, this deep, deep understanding will take place where we know that we can't rely on anything, that all things will change. Yeah. And one can say, well, that's fairly morbid. Yeah. You to just realize that there's nothing reliable in the universe. But if you meet anybody who has finally understood this, after having applied their mind to it over a period of time, you'll find that they're really quite joyful. Because the problem with attaching to things is that when you attach to something and you invest in it and you rely on it and then it breaks, you suffer tremendously. And you suffer in a way that was completely optional, completely preventable. When you no longer invest this hope in things, you're no longer getting caught by that suffering. And you find that something with your relationship to the external world has changed. Now, the Buddha used a very funny word that it doesn't have a lot of like normal applications. This word is asava. And the word can mean something like outflow. I think Ajahn Tanisaro, Ajahn Jeff, he likes to use the translation effluent, which again is not a word that we typically use in the English language. It means something like sewage. Yeah. And the notion is that the mind it has asava, it has these outflows, it has this sewage, this leaking of its energies and its fixations and its mental attentions out into the world. Yeah, and the reason this happens is because of ignorance and desire. It's because we've never been told, hey, you're leaking. And it's because we think that the leaking gets us something. We think that identifying with things and attaching to things and investing our hopes and aspirations in things will make us happy. But once somebody clues us into the fact that it's actually causing us tremendous suffering, there is some layer of flowing out into the world that we cut off, as though we were sealing off a broken sewage pipe that was leaking, yeah, effluents into the world. Yeah, and we find that a source of suffering suddenly dries up. Yeah, our life becomes that much more peaceful. And so this first layer of understanding based on impermanence allows us to reduce the degree to which we go into the world. And if you can begin to see that relates to something that we do actually a lot in, especially modern Buddhist practice, but that is meditation, right? And what is it that happens when we practice meditation, when we practice mindfulness, when we do formal sitting quietly in a room somewhere? Well, we might experience that very same process where it's not that we recognize, oh, my mind has been leaking. It's been flowing out towards my schedule, towards my work, towards my friends and family, towards my pets, towards my car, towards my bank account. I didn't realize, but there it is. Look at all this effluent everywhere. It's a mess. It's not that we see that. But if we do sit in meditation for a time, we will begin to experience a state of peace. And this is as we say, the third noble truth is we have to wake up or realize where this sense of peace is coming from. It's coming from the fact that actually there was a lot of suffering in going out into the world and seeking our happiness in the world. And through practicing mindfulness and through attaining samadhi or composure of mind, we're no longer doing that. And because we're no longer doing that, we're no longer suffering. Yeah. And this leads us to the second layer of suffering, which I've already been alluding to, and that is dukkha. This second understanding that the Buddha associates. He often draws a line between anicca, impermanence, to dukkha, that is suffering, to anatta, not self. And this is an implied order, though we're not forced to follow it in that order. But when he lays it out, especially in the Anatalakkhana Sutta, the discourse on not self, he lays it out in exactly that order. He says, look, these things are impermanent. They change, they break down. Because of that, they cause you suffering, right? If this thing was permanent and reliable and stable and never let you down, then I would not say it caused you suffering, but it doesn't do any of those things. In fact, you can be guaranteed it will break at some point. Yeah, I'm quite confident of it. I keep replacing these things. Yeah. And because you can know it will break down, you know that it has this quality of suffering already imbued within it. And it's this quality of suffering is not that the thing is intrinsically making you suffer. And some people quote the Buddha and quote the underlying notion of Buddhism as Buddhists believe that all things are suffering. And if you talk to somebody who has deeply studied the Buddhist teaching, they probably won't get too upset about this. They'd be like, okay, that's not quite how I would say it, but fine. Yeah, because it doesn't bother them, right? Once you get acclimated to the notion of suffering, it's really not that scary. It's like, yeah, no, everything in samsara can cause you suffering. But it's not exactly what the Buddha is saying. He's not saying that this thing is 100% always causing you suffering. If it did, I would not have purchased it, right? You wouldn't go through a store and on every single label that says this thing is 100% guaranteed to cause you suffering, right? You wouldn't buy it then. You wouldn't pick it up. It actually has a lot of uses. It actually has a lot of functions, and it may please you from time to time. It is not 100% suffering. But it does when we talk about the characteristic of dukkha, what we recognize is this thing, it's almost a negation. It's a negation of the idea that this thing is 100% pleasing, right? And this gets to something I talk about over and over again, which is understanding the nature of Dhamma and the idea of truth. So we have two kinds of truth that we encounter when we begin to ponder reality, when we begin to look at the world around us. We have conventional truths or subjective truths that are true in certain contexts. But when we explore them, we find that they're only true when certain conditions are present. And when those conditions are not present, or when other negating conditions are present, then those things are not true. Yeah. And then we have what are called ultimate truths, which even if other conditions are present, they don't stop being true, right? And so when we talk about the characteristic of dukkha, the characteristic of suffering that is within all objects, it's more of a negation and a recognition of the nature of something. So we can see that under certain circumstances, an object will be useful, will be desirable, will be functional, right? And that is a conventional truth. In certain circumstances, something will be sukha. It will be pleasing, right? And it's not anti-Buddhist to believe this. It's not like a wrong view to see that some things can be pleasing from time to time. Like we have dana, we have sila, we have the Brahma Viharas. We have so many things in the Buddhist teaching that are pleasing. In so many suttas, at the end of the sutta, everybody delights in the Buddha's words. If it were un-Buddhist to be satisfied with anything in the world, then at the end of those suttas where the Buddha is finished giving his Dhamma talks, they would say, and all the monks were thoroughly dissatisfied, right? They were not in any way overjoyed to hear the Buddha speak. They endured it with equanimity. And if you ever encounter a congregation that is enduring the teachings of their teacher with equanimity, don't hang around, right? There are things in the world that can please us, but conditionally, right? If we were if we were sick and we were hungry and we were in pain, we probably would not be able to enjoy even the words of the Buddha, right? We would be just too racked with pain. So even something which is so uplifting, so enlightening as the Dhamma can't always satisfy us, right? And this is where things turn around, right? They turn around and we see, well, what if we take the perspective that these things are always unreliable, that they always have the ability to let us down, that they always have because they have the nature to change, they they're always one step away from this layer of suffering. Yeah. And we can recognize that they will generate suffering if we give them the ability to, right? They will, if we attach to them in any way, they will cause us suffering. And one way this is put in I think also in the Anatta Sutta, is oh, it just fell out of my mind. Trying to quote a sutta that I haven't read in a little while. But this nature that it is, how is it put? It's actually in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Yeah, the five um, something about the grasping mind. I can't get the exact words, so I'm not gonna butcher it. But you're nodding. You know what I'm trying to say, yeah? We have the nature to grasp at things, and it is our nature of grasping at things that actually causes the suffering. It's not the object itself. The object is neutral, but it is the fact that all objects, be they made of form or be they feelings, or be they memories or perceptions, or be they thoughts and habits, or be they consciousness itself. If they are any of those five things, and it's a bit of a net, all things technically fall within those five things, then they are something that our mind can grasp at, that it can adhere to. And when it does adhere to those things, it experiences suffering. Yeah. So from that ultimate standpoint, we can see that if we take the notion that this thing can always make us suffer, that it is always of the nature to be possible to suffer over, then we have a truth that is not conditional. It doesn't change. Yeah. Even when we are enjoying the thing, even when the thing is useful and it's working exactly like I want it to, still it has that nature of being able to let me down. Yeah, and that doesn't change. It isn't conditional. Even when we're enjoying something, it can still have that nature of dukkha, that ability to cause us to suffer. Yeah, and that is an ultimate truth. That is a stable truth. That is not a conditional truth. Yeah. And so this is another layer of understanding the mind begins to reach. And as it does, another layer of the asavas will kind of dry up. Another way of going out into the world will start to dry up, where we realize, to the degree that we delight in something, to the degree that we attach to something, we suffer over it, to exactly that degree. And to those things that we don't get attached to those things that we don't delight in, to those things that we don't invest with our hopes and aspirations, we don't suffer over them. Yeah, and an example I particularly like, because I don't know, it's a little mischievous perhaps, some people might say, but the example I really like is when, the example of if somebody had like a fancy watch or a new phone, and they had just gotten something fancy and wonderful and delightful, and they dropped it and it broke. Just say, would you suffer over that? And you'd be like, well, no, I'd probably tell them to be more mindful. Yeah. Because, why would you suffer over somebody else breaking their phone? You would just say, oh, well, that'll teach you to hold on to it or get a screen protector or whatnot. But now what if it was your phone? What if it was your watch? What if it was your piece, your brand new thing that you had just acquired and you broke it? Yeah, would you then suffer? You say, yeah, normally you would experience some amount of pain if something that you just got like broke right in front of you, right? And you can see that the objects in our world, they're neutral, right? The thing that made you suffer was not the phone breaking or the watch breaking or the electronic breaking. It was the fact that it was your phone or watch or electronic that was breaking that made you suffer. It wasn't the thing itself. Yeah. And so this layer of attachment, identification, and investment in things starts to dissipate. And it's not even that we've been working on this notion of not self explicitly. But through this process of understanding impermanence, through this process of understanding suffering, the suffering that comes from attaching to things, we have actually been shearing off layers of attachment and identification without even trying. And I find that this is why there is this kind of understood and implied sequence to these understandings because impermanence is right there at the surface. It's quite easy to grasp because everything in our world is changing before our eyes. And now suffering is a bit harder to grasp because it goes against our desires. You know, we really want things to be good. We really want to be able to rely on them. But when we get hurt enough by this investing in things, then we start to wise up to it and say, like, well, what if I just didn't do that? What if I didn't just put all my hopes into this external thing and just let it go, just let it be, just understood it was impermanent from the get-go, just understood it would eventually let me down from the get-go and use it just as long as I can. Yeah, always kind of looking at its sideways. Is this the day you're going to break on me? And that way we actually get protected from a whole layer of suffering. Yeah. We have been letting go of layers of ourself without even trying. And a new layer of peace, a new experience of peace begins to dawn where this is like that story of the Zen farmer, yeah, where something goes good for him and the neighbor comes and is like, oh, this is wonderful. Oh, what good fortune. And the farmer says, oh, who can say what's good or bad? And then something bad happens to the farmer and the neighbor comes, oh, I am so sorry. And the farmer says, well, who can say what's good or bad? And the joke is that every day the neighbor is coming and it's either something good has happened or there's something bad has happened. And the wise Zen farmer is just saying, well, I mean, who can say? We'll just see how it turns out. Yeah. And when you get to that degree of not associating with things, you realize that you have let go of a lot of self that other people invest in things. Some external thing happened. So and everybody rushes to you and say, this is your good fortune. This is your wealth. This is your advantage. Yeah. But the person who has given up at investing in external things in that way will say, well, who can say? Yeah, we'll see how this turns out. And so if it goes well, then yeah, they'll continue to use it, and it's this is nice. This is nice. Not attached to it, but this is nice. But if it goes poorly, they'll say, well, okay, well, it's a good thing I didn't get attached to it because it had the nature to change. Yeah. But now, say we have done this process of looking at impermanence. We have done this process of looking at the nature of suffering inherent in things that can be attached to. And we still find, as the Venerable Kamiko says in one sutta, there is still this smell, this aroma of self, and you can't really pin it down. It's like having a flower. Have all these fake flowers. Yeah, there's one. Ha. Yeah. It's like you have a flower and somebody were to ask you, it's like, where is the scent of the flower? Is it in the petal? Is it in the stem? Is it in the pollen? Is it in the color? Where is the smell coming from? And if you ever had a flower and you've ever ground it up, you'll find that curiously, even though the stem seems to be a completely different part of the flower, if you grind it up and you smell, it actually does have some of that same fragrance. And you can almost, yeah, if you've ever tried that, you'd be like, wow, it's just so weird. It's like I don't really know. It has this smell. I cannot deny that, but I can't say exactly where this smell is coming from. Yeah, it seems to infuse the whole thing. And the Venerable Kemiko, who at the time was a non-returner, who gave a Dhamma talk, this is how he described the sense of self. Even when we know that things are impermanent, even when we know that they'll cause us to suffer if we attach to them, still there can be this lingering notion of a self somewhere, infusing pretty much everything we do and say. And what do we do about it? And this is something that even a non-returner such as the Venerable Kemiko, he didn't have a ready answer for it. He had studied it and he had mastered meditation and he had reached the end of his life where he was almost on his deathbed and he still hadn't figured the answer out. He's like, I can't find it. If I could find it, it's almost that I could rip it out of my mind and be done with it. But because it just seems to be permeating the whole system, I don't know where to look for it. Uh, Story has a good ending. He figured it out in giving the Dhamma talk and then attained enlightenment right there and then. But for us, even once we've applied ourselves to this exploration of anicca and dukkha, it may be that we still recognize that we're getting in these circumstances where we suffer. And we're not suffering because things are impermanent. We get that they're impermanent. We're not suffering because we invested in them heavily. We knew these things were going to go wrong. But even still, something changes, or a loved one gets ill, or we get ill, or we lose an ear, or some other body part. And we look at it and we say, like, that still stings. Why does that still hurt? Why does that still bother me so much? Maybe we wake up in the morning and we look in the mirror, and even though we have no notion of vanity left, even though we've been taking the precepts for years and we don't use makeup, we don't wear all this fancy jewelry, we don't care how we look. And we tell people we don't care how we look. But then we look in the mirror, we got these bags under our eyes and like, oh wow, I look like I haven't slept in weeks. Is that what I look like? Is that what other people see when they look at me? Ah. And then it's like, but I thought I didn't care. I thought I didn't take it personally. I thought I was completely equanimous to all circumstances. And this is something that even longtime practitioners can sometimes be caught unawares by something and they find that suddenly they want something. They see somebody has a brand new phone and they're looking at their iPhone 7 or whatever, and they realize that they're 12 years behind in terms of technology, and things have been steadily breaking on them, and they're like, wow, maybe it would be nice. Look at oh, it's so flashy and it takes such nice pictures, and like, am I experiencing desire for a physical object? What is wrong with me? Yeah, or they'll see that they've just been relying on something. Maybe somebody said, "Oh, okay, tomorrow Bante will come and we'll offer this great big meal and we'll bring all of these things," and they'll list off all the things that they're bringing, and the next day they get in a car accident and they're not going to make it in time, and so the Bantes have to, just find something to eat. Yeah, and all of these things that you've been thinking about, oh, tomorrow they're going to bring this whole big feast and lay all these things out, and suddenly you don't have it. And you're not attached to food, right? You're a good Buddhist. You don't care. You're equanimous to all of these things. But suddenly they're yanked away from you when you were just getting used to the notion that they were going to be there. And oh, why does that sting? And we find that there is still this notion of self. There's this notion of an I, of a self. And it's not really in any one thing, and yet it persists. And it's not that we're doing anything wrong. Again, we were born into ignorance and desire. Yeah. And so a lot of the Buddha's deepest and most profound teachings are some of the hardest to grasp from time to time. And we started with one of these teachings where the Buddha he's sitting in the forest with a bunch of monks, and he turns to the monks and say, hey, if a bunch of villagers came and they gathered up all the sticks and branches and twigs and stuff and walked off with them, would you say, they took my branches and sticks and twigs and leaves? They took me, they're carrying me away. And the monk said, no, we wouldn't think that because I mean they're sitting in a forest. There's plenty of sticks and leaves. Yeah, they wouldn't care. It was like, yeah, it was never mine to begin with. But how would we feel if somebody came and is like, I'm going to take your eyeball, thunk, and popped it out of your head? It was like, well, I was using that. Would we suffer? Probably. That would be rather unexpected, yeah. But this was a form of attachment we probably didn't think we had because it's just always been there. But even these things that we're quite used to can be a source of the same sort of suffering. And the Buddha is encouraging us to look at all things and to identify those first two characteristics as a way of sort of prying the mind off of this notion of a self that kind of infuses and gets into corners that we didn't think it would get into. Yeah. And so we might not really think about it, but vision is highly conditioned, right? The Buddha says like visual objects are not ours. And we'd say, well, yeah, I get that. But how is he saying that? He's saying it's because they're conditioned, yeah? Say there's this Buddha on the shelf behind me, right? I can see it, and therefore, like I can identify with it. I can say, oh yeah, there is a Buddha statue in the room with me. But if something were to cover it up, we see that I can no longer see it. I no longer really know that it's there. I can neither confirm nor deny the fact that it is still there because my vision is obstructed, and yours as well, coincidentally. It is still there, but I didn't know for sure, right? Because I couldn't see it. The act of seeing requires not just the visual object to be there, but also the eye to be functional and capable of seeing. And then here in this universe, there needs to be a medium, there needs to be light. If this room was entirely dark, even if there was a visible object, and even if I did have functional eyes, I still wouldn't be able to see it. Yeah, eye consciousness would not arise. I would not be able to say there's a Buddha on the shelf there. I can see it. Yeah, it is the eye consciousness is dependent on the existence of those three things, the object, the base, and the medium. Yeah. And the consciousness, because it is relying on external things, the things that rely on the consciousness also only arise when the consciousness is present, like the feeling of pleasant, painful, and neutral. These are dependent on the consciousness. And if the consciousness can be obstructed with something as simple as, you know, getting in the way or turning off the lights, then it's not reliable that we can experience pleasure or pain or neutral sensations from seeing, right? These actually are coming and going all the time. Yeah. So we might be quite used to thinking of I am a person who moves through the world by seeing, or I am a person who moves through the world through hearing, or I'm a person who moves through the world through the sense of touch. And yet this is a highly conditioned experience. Yeah. And it's all well and good, and it doesn't cause us much suffering when it's there. But when it does fail for some reason, we get the flu and we can no longer taste or smell anything, or there's a loud noise and suddenly our ears are ringing and we can't really hear for a little while. Then suddenly we recognize, wow, I was leaning on that. I was expecting that to be there. I was attached to that in a very subtle way. And it's not that I was stuck to it as an object. It's just that I took it to be something that was just always there. I took it to be part of me. Yeah, when really it is only there in certain circumstances. And this is something that we can usually only perceive when we start to experience samadhi, when we start to get to a state of meditation. And I'm not talking about deep samadhi, but there is a basic level of samadhi where our mind is strong enough that we can see the arising and ceasing of mental objects. Yeah. And for most people, because they're so invested, their outflows are going out into the world so heavily, they can't really see their minds. They know that they're thinking, they're very aware that they're thinking, and they're very aware that their thinking is causing them anxiety, right? But they can't really see the thoughts as they arise and cease. They can't see the patterns as they arise and cease, and they can't really perceive mental objects. Like they know when they have a memory, it's like, oh, it's just like I'm back there. But it's hard for them to see the things in the memory. It's hard for them to hear the things in the memory. It's hard for them to smell the things in their memory. They simply remember, oh, it was like this. They have the vaguest notion that their memory includes this information. But when we're sitting and calmly attain a state of composure in the mind, we'll see that because the asa flows are drying up, because our outflows are drying up, the mind becomes sharper, becomes clearer, and we can actually start to see these mental objects. And when this happens, the mind has a kind of direction to move that it can let go of all the five other directions it's been moving habitually your whole life. And it can, that is the five senses. It can let go of sight and sound and smell and taste and touch. And it can stop flowing out into those five senses. With the sixth sense, the mental sense, as a base, your mind can attain a new level of composure. And as it lets go of the five senses, the worldly senses, you'll start to see that they are, in fact, impermanent. They are highly conditioned. And you might be able to see that they're actually not, they haven't always been there. If you slow the mind down enough to the point that you can see the arising and ceasing of things, you will see that when you are seeing, you are only seeing. And when you are hearing, you are only hearing. And when you are smelling, you're only smelling. It is though there is a world composed of visual objects, and this world doesn't share any other characteristics with the world composed of sounds. And that doesn't share any characteristics with the world composed of smells. Which makes a lot of sense because you can say that that statue up there has a golden color to it. But would you say that statue up there has a golden smell to it? No, the smell of it will be something quite different. It's kind of a acrylic-y, harsh chemical kind of smell that it has to it. Or maybe somebody's burned a lot of incense next to it and has a lovely floral smell. We really wouldn't know unless we got up next to it. Because what we see and what we smell and what we hear and what we feel, all of these are completely different. And each one happens by itself and has its own conditions supporting it. And because of this, once we start to see that they're all divided up and they're happening separately, they couldn't possibly be ourself. You know, they are describing objects, but they are not describing us. They are not describing our world. They are just describing a world. They are describing a experience. And when we reach a state of composure that we are not flowing out into that experience, we can just watch that experience and say, oh, look, this is what it's like to not be attached to seeing. This is what it's like to not be attached to hearing, to smelling, to tasting and touching. And that level of composure allows us to actually start to fundamentally let go of the nature of self. Yeah. Because in order to completely attain understanding of not self, we have to stop flowing out into anything. Yeah. We start by not flowing out into the senses, but eventually we're going to have to stop flowing into mental objects themselves. We're going to have to get to a level of stability where we can even see thoughts arising and ceasing and know, well, these are really no different from the visible objects and the sounds and the smells and the tastes and the touches. These are just thoughts. These are just mental objects. This mental sense base, which is a refuge when we're trying to get away from all the noise of the five sense world, is still not a reliable refuge, is still arising and ceasing, is still impermanent. And thoughts and feelings and memories and habits, they still cause you suffering when you get attached to them. Because, as the Buddha said, you know, it's actually better for people to believe that the body is their self. Yeah, because in 100 years or a little bit more, they will see that body drop dead and they will know they were wrong. That it will be proven for them that that was not the case. But woe are they who believe that their mind is their self, because it's already changing constantly and very, very quickly, all of the time. Yeah, when we can start to see this nature of change, the mind, the identification, the asavas will finally pull back. And now we get the question of, well, what are they pulling back from? What are they pulling back to? Like, where is it that the mind is retreating to if it finally retreats from the mental objects themselves? And it's a kind of funny thing. It's like the question of where does the candle flame go when it goes out? You know, is there a cupboard somewhere in the temple where we keep all the candle flames and we'll let it back out, the next time we do puja? No, when a candle flame goes out, it just goes out because it only existed based on certain conditions. And when those conditions cease, the flame ceases. Yeah. And so with the asavas only exist because we are the nature to try to flow out into things. But when we realize this doesn't serve us at all, when we realize even the nature of getting acclimated or getting used to something being there can cause us to suffer, can cause us to experience this sharp kind of, oh no, things changed. I didn't expect that. Oh no, this thing was conditioned all along. I didn't see that coming. When we realize that kind of suffering still waits for us and we stop flowing out into anything, it's not that the asavas retreat and end up in one spot. Because again, we were looking for them and we couldn't find them anywhere. It's just that they were conditioned by that desire. They were conditioned by that very act of going out itself. And when we stop doing that act of going out into things, then the asavas themselves cease. And we find that they had no core, they had no base to begin with. There was no self. Mhm. All right. So on this new moon, this Uposatha, this final Uposatha of the hot season, hopefully leading to a rainy, not so hot season, I offer these thoughts for reflection. Hopefully you can take something with you and it can be of use in your continued progress in the path.